move this a bit. I'm not sure if I'm going to be your friend because some of the stuff I'm going to show you, you may not like what you're going to see. Because on the horizon there are some interesting dynamics taking place across Canada. Now, have I got the right one here? No, I got the wrong slide, see? Keep going. There we go. Okay, as mentioned, the Construction Sector Council, our task is to work with industry to find out what's going on in the industry and try to establish indicators of what the labor market conditions are like. We do this for 33 construction trades and occupations. In that, we also include, managers and supervisors, estimators as that goes on. But essentially, our job is to track what's happening and what the labor market implications will be. By identifying these market pressures, the critical piece is because as these pressures emerge, there are implications. And some of them we heard already, talking about, the difficulties of recruiting skilled workers, project delays and schedules, added costs, safety, quality, and productivity. All these factors come into play as market conditions tighten. And what I hope to demonstrate to you today, that over the next few years, as we go across Canada, there's going to be a lot of tight conditions that you're going to be faced with, and that's the reality of how we see the projects unfold. So we need to understand these conditions, not just in your own backyard, but you need to understand them nationally. There's a very mobile workforce. You're competing. Newfoundland has a lot of work going on, and they're competing to try to get their guys back that are in Fort McMurray, and we know the challenges on that one. And whether they go to Fort McMurray or up in the lower Churchill, who knows, or even in Come by Chance. But in any case, and you'll probably pick up in my voice eventually, because I've been out of Newfoundland for a long time, this is the Newfie Hour. So this is the third Newfie you're going to get in a row. So sorry, you're stuck with us. But in any case, we produce annual reports. One of the things, of the problems with an annual report is on turnarounds, your peaks are more seasonal, spring of the year, fall of the year. So we don't quite capture those pressure points. And we're working to try to establish a better sort of system to better map where those peak loads are so that we can better track where those pressure points are for which trades. We have built a macroeconomic system, which I'm sure you do not want to know about, but in any case, there is a macroeconomic system. Then we work heavily with industry to identify what's happening in their regions, what are the demographic situations I'll allude to or talk to as we go forward. But really, it's important for us. It's what we call a bottom-up approach. We really work with industry to try to establish what's going on in the regions and basically to kick us around to say what they're feeling and what we're producing makes sense. So we establish committees in each province. So we engage 3 times through the year over 100 stakeholders that we consult with to get their feedback on what's happening in the industry. And that's a critical piece for us because we can't possibly understand what's going on in each province. We need the stakeholders to tell us what's going on in each province to make sure we get an accurate picture and what we produce feels what they're feeling, at least in the near term. In the future, it's dependent on whether the projects proceed on schedule, demographics unfold, and the aging workforce. So we'll touch a little bit on each of those. We do it for the 10 provinces, but also important for us, we do all sectors, residential, non-residential, even within non-residential. We look at all the different types of sectors in there because as the demands changes across those sectors, the implications on the trade requirements will change as well. And in addition, we do the maintenance. Now, we do maintenance not just turnarounds, but an ongoing maintenance, the sustaining capital, as well as maintenance on every commercial building and institution that gets built. Those are all draws on the workforce. And for the turnarounds and that, you have to look at all those markets because you're pulling from the same labor pool. No matter what way you look at it, there's all these forces that sort of dovetail in and out. There are core maintenance workers, but as you know, as you get through peak demands, you're going to have to tap into the other sources to get the needed workers. So basically, in terms of what we're seeing now, and I had to tell you, we're literally in the process of wrapping up this round of analysis. So whatever I show you here today is preliminary and subject to change, but not by much, we hope. So basically, there's a couple of phases that we're looking at. The first phase is, we had the turn down in 2009, significant impact in some provinces. So we're still covering back in some provinces recovery through to 2012. And then across many provinces, a really steady expansion, as I'll try to demonstrate for you. But, obviously, as you go across the different provinces and different sectors, there are different dynamics that play in how the market plays out. Just focusing primarily on the non-residential sector, And we focus on the 33 trades the Construction Sector Council tracks. We capture about 70%, 75% of the industry. We miss, for example, the office worker support staff at the office. We don't cover them. We're more focused on the on-site trades and then some supervisory trades as well. And what you'll see here is sort of the, the dip in 2009 essentially was the turn down where projects were canceled or postponed, very immediate in many provinces, very harsh in BC, probably more direct on the residential sector and the commercial sector. And we saw that play out as it did, but it was very brief relative to any other recession we've had. I mean, as you'll see, that uptick is very quick. It was brief, harsh, but we turned it around. And if I had to go back prior to 2007, we've been having about, maybe I'm not sure if it's 12, 14 years of steady growth. Very steady growth. The industry has been pulling people in like crazy. It's unbelievable. And the real fact is we got to continue to do it. So we managed to get in before, but we also got a time when there's age demographics at play, which I'll show you or talk to you about, and that's not just for construction, that's for every industry. So, as we go forward, we're competing with all markets, all industries for the necessary workforce and the skilled workers. The key trades in demand are really driven by big industrial and engineering type projects. That's the real driving force as we look forward. There's a long list, I'm not going to read them, but as you see them there, you're going to see many trades that are huge for the turnaround and maintenance work. So it's not just for your work. You're going to need them at a very intense period, but the industry is going to need them collectively across most provinces. Some provinces a little bit weaker, but I'll sort of touch on those as we go through. But these are your typical projects, typical trades that you'll need, and they'll be under big demand certainly over the next 4 or 5 years, and then over the next 10 years, continuing as the age demographics play its role. This is just to illustrate, what's happening across the country. The red areas there are the very hot markets, the yellow being hot in the early stages and then easing off as projects wind down. BC is kind of unique. It's a green there, which means it's more balanced or moderate growth. But the real unique part about BC is most of the new work is in the north. The weaker part of BC, and there's probably some people around BC here may or may not disagree with me, the weaker part is in the south. The key will be getting the workers from the south to the projects in demand in the north, which may not be easy, but those are dynamics. And this is true pretty much in a lot of the projects that we're seeing, the dynamics of major projects in rural or northern areas and getting the workers with the skill sets to those jobs introduce a different set of circumstances as played out, and which has been the case played out in Fort McMurray, and Newfoundland will continue to have to do with the Lower Churchill development, and then we'll see how that unfolds. Manitoba, this graph is really from our scenario last year. Manitoba should be really on the verge of a yellow-red. It's a steady growth, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. Ontario has a lot of work. Quebec is more of a balanced, steady growth. And then you got Newfoundland, and Newfoundland is a yellow only because we've got it peaking and then easing off, but we'll talk a little about that. I'm going to run through each of these provinces just to give you an idea of what's happening in the regions in terms of the employment and labor market. Newfoundland. Yeah, I got some funky question marks on mine here, so it's also on your chart there. Newfoundland, I mean, it's quite staggering as what happened in the past couple of years and continue to happen over the next several years. We're going around, we estimate to be around 6,000 workers in non-residential workers, going to increase by 3,000 to reach peak in 2016. Newfoundland is going to rely on bringing workers from outside. And that is a reality for some trades, which is, now, some of them arguably are getting people back from wherever they may be now. Newfoundland has become a very mobile workforce. The key drivers there, Lower Churchill, Hebron, mining, even the refinery work on the maintenance side was on there. So the big demands. Now, it peaks in 2015, 2016, because this is where we assess known projects. So this is where our comfort zone is that certain projects are on the books, they're going to go ahead. There's a long list of projects in Newfoundland that are also planned that could really change that future, that it may not come down as much by the time you hit 2015, 2016. Iron Ore Canada is looking at whether they're doing more work. So there's a whole bunch of other types, especially on the mining side, that may come on stream and change how Newfoundland may work. But basically what we're facing here over the near term for Newfoundland are very tight conditions for many of the trades that I showed you on that list a while ago, and that's likely a new scenario for Newfoundland that will take place. So they'll be struggling to keep workers, retaining workers, and getting new recruits into Newfoundland to meet the peak loads. Now I'm talking about here a lot of the new capital projects, and that's the Lower Churchill going ahead, and Hebron and all these projects. So they proceed as scheduled. This is what Newfoundland will actually face over the next while. Ontario, as another key market, Ontario is the largest market in Canada. There's a fair bit, well, there's two key markets. There's Northern Ontario with the Ring of Fire and all the mining development. There's also a lot of utility work, and that spans the nuclear refurbishments and new, as well as solar, wind, and thermal. So there's a fair amount of utility work planned over the next 10 years. But keeping Ontario up at the end there is really the proposed new nuclear project by Ontario Power Generation. There are some out there that would debate whether that project will go ahead as scheduled, but certainly we have it on the books in our discussions with Ontario Power Generation is that project will go ahead. So, I mean, you're looking at it in Ontario, for example, if we were to say from 2008, there's a workforce going from, this non-residential workforce going from around 150,000 people up close to 200,000. And that's significant growth in terms of where these people are going to come from. And the north, because it's such a small area, the big developments up there are going to put real big pressures on that small geographic area and the trade requirements. Now, the other important part to recognize as we build all these facilities from a maintenance side is that as we build them, sustaining capital and ongoing maintenance will become more. So we're going to see in the future almost a shift from new capital to a higher emphasis on maintenance and turnaround type work. It's just a reality of what's going to happen, and we'll show that a little bit in Alberta as we get out there. Manitoba, again, growth that is unprecedented for Manitoba. You're going from an estimate of 16,000 people in 2010 rising up to 19 and a half, almost 20,000 people. A lot of the work here is driven by Manitoba Hydro with several projects underway and proposed. That will keep markets very tight in Manitoba for the next several years for many of the trades that I listed. And this is, again, as those projects crest, it will ease off a bit. Well, we believe Manitoba will up a new level of employment for the Manitoba non-residential construction market. For Saskatchewan, again, there was I think we measured $9–10 billion worth of projects underway over the last couple of years. The market has staggering growth in terms of where the market started from at around 16,000 going up to around 25,000. A lot of this is driven by the oil refinery, potash mines, and utility projects. Again, as some of these projects ease off, Saskatchewan will ease off from its market, but it's going to stay at a very high level. So demand pressures for trades in Manitoba and Saskatchewan will be significant now and for the foreseeable near future. We rank trades on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being excess supply of workers, 5 being an extreme shortage. In a lot of cases, you'll see in Saskatchewan, 4s, which are very on the tight side, and you're going to have trouble finding the skilled workers to meet the demands, especially coming up through that rise up to 2013 when the projects are expected to peak. Now, Alberta, you'll see the big dip there in 2009. That was very much a reality as projects ended, postponed, canceled. You see the release of almost 15,000 workers as those projects ended. People were coming off major projects with no new jobs coming on to go to, basically. But the recovery kicked in fairly well. The project came back on stream, continues to come back on stream. But as you'll see, which will be easier to demonstrate on the oil sands type of information, but the oil sands projects, utilities, pipelines are going to drive Alberta to another new level. If conditions were tight in 2007, which they were, it's going to move up to a whole new level in the next 10 years. This chart here maps the oil sands investment. You'll see coming up there from 2001, you see a steady rise up to 2007, 2008, where it averages about $15 billion worth of investment in oil sands. Then we saw the dip in 2009 as the recession took hold and projects ended and were canceled, postponed. But then a quick recovery. Work started coming back on. But the real key thing to watch here is that it's going to, again, a whole new level. We're going up to around $25 billion worth of planned. And I can't really separate it here, although we're looking to separate it here. What you'd probably see is a composition also changing from what's new construction to what's sustaining capital and maintenance type work. So if we were to map that, what you'd see is a growing piece on the maintenance side in Alberta because of all these investment and facilities that have been built had to be maintained. In terms of the employment that we estimate to be oil sands driven, We estimated back in around 2007, the previous peak, to be around 25,000 workers working directly in the oil sands projects. We see them back to that level by next year, and then a second wave kicks in the latter part of the year, which now takes it from around 35,000 workers up to around 45,000. So the challenges that were there in 2007, we now have to look at the potential to bring in around another 10,000 workers to meet the demands for Alberta. And that's going to be a significant challenge as we plan for that going forward. Now, I should emphasize that this is new construction. Sustaining capital will play a bigger role in order for the facilities to maintain its production levels, and then as well as ongoing maintenance. So all these factors come into play in terms of how we do this calculation. Having gone to this point, we really looked at just one piece of the puzzle, and that's the expansion demand. Expansion demand obviously is subject to change. Schedules can change. New projects can come on stream and change the dynamics on the expansion demand. But the second critical piece is less, or probably won't be able to change, at least not in the near term, is the replacement demand. We have the aging workforce. It's a reality. There are no quick fixes. That one is a path that we've set out and we have to deal with. And we assess this for the 33 trades. Now, from a maintenance side, or any from a construction side, undoubtedly, there are many of you that rely on Atlantic Canada to meet your peak loads. Atlantic Canada, right now, in some cases, are a diminishing population, but in any case, over the next 10 years, they're going to lose about 30% of its workforce. So if you were making planning and you knew that X percent of your workforce came from Atlantic Canada, just on the demographics alone, you better plan for about 30% of them not being there when you look out over your long-term planning. And that's a reality. In addition to that, you've got a fair bit of work happening in Atlantic Canada. You know, everybody's talking about the shipbuilding contract for Nova Scotia. We don't know how that's going to play out yet, but it will be a factor for those that rely on the Atlantic Canada workers to meet the peak demands. But in any case, about 22% in Canada of the current workforce is going to retire. Again, doesn't seem like a big number, you know, around 2% per year, but it's at a time when our population is not growing significantly, as well as we're competing against every other industry for the needed workers as they face similar types of aging demographics. So this is a big challenge for construction. Denial is not going to work anymore on the age demographics. I think many of you could probably look around your workforce and see the reality of some of the workers that are out there. And then even critical, as someone mentioned about the supervisors and foremen, they're up there now, and you lose a lot of skills when they go out the door and not easy to replace with the new workers coming in. So the new reality is we are going to have to deal with this no matter what time we're dealing with in terms of the construction industry. This was something that is going to face us more and more as the baby boomers face retirement and accept retirement. Now, people will argue they're hanging around a bit longer, and that's probably true. The longer they hang around, you guys will probably know better than I do, there are bigger concerns on productivity and safety. There's only so much you can squeeze out of a worker that eventually you have to reconfigure as to how you're going to use them. So as we put the two pieces together, we're looking at, from new construction, the industry to grow by about 100,000 workers from expansion demand across all the provinces, and about 219,000 of people we have to replace because of retirements. These are significant numbers that we have to deal with. Now, we expect construction is going to get its fair share of new entrants to the industry. So some of that will be offset by about 160,000, which will be new entrants. You know, the new people coming into the workforce, construction will get a share. Probably about 160,000 plus will get through the new entrants in the workforce. That still leaves us with a gap of about over 150,000 workers that we're going to have to get from various sources of labor supply. So this is Canada, so this is not a mobility from one province to another. This is the Canadian number. So now we're going to have to pick from recruiting people from other industries, other supply sources that we probably haven't traditionally tapped into, more women into construction, Aboriginals, and immigration. These are all factors in terms of how do we go forward in terms of construction. So as we see, the major projects will continue to create pressures at peak periods. There are opportunities at the interprovincial mobility because basically we try to map out where some projects are starting up and when they're ending and whether there's a potential. We don't move them, but there's a potential that they may be able to go from as projects end in one province to as work picks up in another province. So there's some bit of that. So the provinces of Alberta, Ontario, Manitoba and BC will be facing sort of a steady growth and sometimes significant growth. Newfoundland will have a peak and then an easing off of the market. Saskatchewan will peak and then ease off, but ease off at a high. And the growth in Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick will probably be fairly flat in the sense that they're at a fair level now and will probably continue at that level. There's no real big projects other than the shipbuilding project that's going to drive any significant changes in those markets. And then the age demographics will continue to dominate the horizon. As I said, that's something that we can't easily change, and it's a reality that we have to deal with. So as we address these challenges, I mean, we only establish where the pressure points are and where the indicators are. Industry has to work in terms of how does it address the challenges. So owners, contractors, labor providers, government must continue to work together to address these challenges. Industry promotion and recruiting, and I should emphasize here that another word that should be here is planning, because that keeps coming up in your discussions here today, that planning, that critical path planning. Planning for the labor force challenge you're going to be faced with. And it's a difficult situation in terms of bodies versus skills. And new apprentices coming in, and how much can you squeeze out of a new apprentice? We hear stuff now about there's jobs that don't want a lot of apprentices because the pressure is get it done fast, get it done on budget. All these factors come into play. But we need those apprentices to be in because even during slow growth periods, it's critical to get those people into the industry and trained properly. So the planning side is critical. People would tell me years ago they'd probably take a couple extra apprentices just to keep them skills, keep the system fed. Now there's no room to carry the extra apprentices anymore. Everything is lean. You were talking about margins. There's not a lot of room here to have any excess supply on the job site. So as I said, you know, targeting youth, women, aboriginals, other industries, immigrants, retaining older workers to some degree. These are the facts and the realities that construction will face, certainly over the next 10 years, and probably in the more immediate future. There are significant pressures in labor markets during peak periods for you to be able to source your needed workers, especially on the maintenance shutdown side, when your peak loads are pretty intense for in some cases for a short period of time, and these workers are on all these major projects. There's going to be a whole lot of shuffling and juggling going on in terms of how you meet those demands with the skilled workers. That was sort of a quick snapshot of where we are in terms of where the pressures are. The bottom line is certainly over the next 4 to 5 years, the pressures are going to be there. They're going to be there for all the trades that you need for your work. When you go out beyond 5 words, we're debating on whether certain projects come on stream or end. But certainly over the next 4 or 5 years, there's going to be a lot of pressures on the industry to be able to keep the jobs rolling, on budget, on schedule. Those conditions will be needed to be managed effectively. We produced the forecast. We're now, like I said, wrapping up one. That will be released in January next year. We release it on the forecast website that you can get any of this information. One of the things that we're doing this year that we hope will help people, we're developing what we'll call canned PowerPoint presentations that will allow you to go in and pick any province, and you'll have a little bit more detail than what I showed you here today about a specific province, which trades are in demand, where the market pressures are, so that if you were doing some planning, you could then look at your neighboring provinces or figuring out as to where you might have potential sourcing for your workers. And we hope that will be an advantage. We're also considering whether to have PowerPoint presentations, which will just be available. You could download a video, and we'll give you sort of a snapshot and the key points of what's happening in every particular province. So that was the Reader's Digest version of where we are. I didn't kick into Newfoundlandese, so I don't know if it was that fast. But I would, if we had a minute, because I think we got a few minutes, I would love to hear what, I mean, certainly your questions for me, whether you're already feeling some of the pressures on the labor markets in terms of finding the skilled workers and what you're, because one of the things we try to engage industry is feedback, and this is an important part for me to say, what are you feeling? So if you do have a comment about your region, please identify your region and where you're feeling those types of pressures. So we have a chance for questions.